Bigfoot Collectors Club with Bryce, Michael, and Riley. I know a story of high strangeness or two. Let's do this.
Hey everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Bigfoot Collectors Club, the show where we talk to amazing guests about their personal paranormal history and share stories of high strangeness. I'm your host, Michael McMillan. With me always is your other host,
Bryce Johnson.
And our super producer,
Riley Bray.
Back in the clubhouse just in time for 420.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
I think this is the first time an episode has fallen on 420 since we launched the podcast in 2017.
Well, you know what to do out there. Light it up and listen.
Yeah,
Smoke them if you got them.
One of us doesn't smoke pot. One of us can only smoke a little bit of pot before they have an anxiety attack. And the other, I'll let him speak for himself.
What do you mean, man?
You know who we need to be on this episode is Gary. Remember Gary, your new character, Bryce? Gary?
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. I should tell you about the time I met my drug dealer on April 20th. It was the best. Our girlfriends from Canada. Well, Dawn was my girlfriend at the time, and my good friend Johnny and his girlfriend, they threw this big 420 party for us. They had like green balloons, and they cut out these green weed leaves. And I mean, it was big, right? And we were like, I think that guy smokes weed. Go give him a green balloon and a weed leaf and tell him to come over. And that's how it all got started. He came over with a bowl. he lived right next door, and he sold us weed for many years to come. Anyway,
that's very meat cute for a weed dealer.
I love that the spirit of Club Bryce came by to say hello on 420.
Oh my God.
Well, we have a guest tonight that I can't wait to get to. So let's get through some very quick club housekeeping, and then we'll bring him in. Don't forget to order your BCC Records shirt. Speaking of Club Bryce, featuring the logos of all of our semi-made up bands here on the podcast. Of course, Club Bryce, Wolf Brother, and BJ and the Shadow Bats, lovingly designed by James Mulholland. All three of these shirts are available right now in the BCC merch shop. Click the link in the episode description of this podcast, or the link in our bio on Instagram at Bigfoot Collectors Club, or over at Twitter at Bigfoot Pod. Be a loyal Club Scout. Give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and help spread Bigfoot Collectors Club to new listeners. If you do, we might read it on the air, like this epic one that somebody left for us recently. Bryce.
Wow. Yeah. Tad Stone submits much more than hairy hominids. They are the playful purveyors of paranormal potboilers who pour stories spanning the proactively pearl. Surprisingly poignant. I didn't even attempt that word. They are.
Wait, I think you got to do this in a Stan Lee voice. Let me take a stab at it. You got to go. Okay, go much more than hairy hominids. They are the playful purveyors of paranormal potboilers who probe stories spanning the proactively puerile and surprisingly poignant.
Nice. That was great. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, take it. Do that.
Great.
Stanley.
They are the defenders of the ephemeral, the chroniclers of curious cryptids, and the detectives of transdimensional innovators. Who are they? Michael McMillan. He is the shadow in the corner of your eye, the cold spot in your hallway that chills your spine, yet makes you sweat. Bryce Johnson, he's a smelly hair sample that defies analysis, the unnerving howl that echoes in your nightmares. And Riley Bray, he is the bent wheat stalk in the impossible crop circle, the sudden fog that hides a portal. Together with celebrity guests, they plumb the secrets of the universe with humor and awe. They are the Bigfoot Collectors Club. 5 stars.
Wow. What a review. What a reading.
Mean, man.
It's like a little bit of Uncle Dickie creeping back in at the end.
No, there was no. What are you talking about? That was all Stan Lee.
Sorry for the typos at the top. I hand transcribed that in.
Sabotage.
Of course.
That was sabotage.
Didn't copy edit one bit. All right. Thank you, Tad, for that lovely review. The rest of you, get out there, give us a 5-star review, and help get the show to more people. Okay, let's bring in our guest.
Let's do it.
Our guest this week is publisher of the Strange Days Zine and co-host of the Strange Dispatch podcast, Andrew Juhl.
Woo!
Hey, what's up, dudes?
Welcome to the show, Andrew. How are you? Now, you're used to being on a paranormal podcast. Is it weird being on someone else's paranormal podcast?
It's not. I mean, it's not weird, but I listen to you dudes all the time, so I'm having a little bit of a starstruck moment because here I am with Club Bryce live on the air. So it's pretty excellent, and I'm super stoked to be here.
I hope you brought some weed, man.
You know what? I'm in a state right now where it's legal, so I could probably get some pretty easily. So.
Nice. Those states are opening up one by one, man.
Yep, New Jersey
coming down like a wall of cards.
Yep. Andrew, we have to ask all of our guests, and it's been a minute since we've had a guest on to ask this question, but what is your personal paranormal history? How did you get into the realm of the high strangeness, and have you had any strange encounters yourself?
Yeah, I mean, that's my favorite question on the show. My paranormal history started like prenatal, before I was even out of the womb. So my the house that my parents were living in when I was born was at this point, I think, pretty irrefutably haunted. My parents and my brother and I had a ton of experiences there, and it started like my parents moved in when my mom was pregnant with me.
Where was this? I'm sorry.
It was in mid-Michigan, in a super small town in Michigan. Closest larger town would be Flint, Michigan.
Okay. I went to Interlochen Arts Academy up near Traverse City, so sort of familiar with Michigan.
Yeah, in the Lower Peninsula, in not terribly far. And it was like the late 80s. I was born in February of 86, and I think my parents moved into this house in like July of 85. And when they moved in, they immediately started experiencing activity. And from what I can like deduce and like when I try to put it in consecutive order as best I can, I'm pretty sure my first cognitive memory is a paranormal experience.
No,
in that house.
Come on.
That's a first on this show. What are we? 196 episodes in. Yeah, that's great. I mean, so your
what a way to come into the world. Dang.
Your earliest memory is like seeing a ghost.
It was hearing a ghost. Yeah. Whoa. So it was like, I don't, you know, I think I could have maybe been like 3.5 or 4 when this happened, but I have like a distinct memory of my mom was a single mother at that time. My brother was in school. He was older than me. My mom was like taking a nap. She put me in front of like Nickelodeon cartoons. David the Gnome was on. I remember this very vividly.
David the Gnome always creeping back up on this show. Every now and then he turns his rosy little head.
That's funny. I didn't put that together, but I do remember that reference before. Yeah, I'm watching David the Gnome, and I hear so that it was a 2-story house. Upstairs was one large room that my brother and I shared. I'm sitting on the sofa. The stairs like are directly across from me, and I hear someone walking down the stairs, and no one's there, and my mom is asleep, and it's only me. And I remember it very vividly, and I remember thinking to myself, because my brother had told me when my mom didn't want him to, that there was a ghost in the house. I remember thinking to myself as like a 4-year-old, oh, it's just the ghost. No biggie. It's just the ghost coming downstairs.
And did you do the right thing and run away and never come back to that house?
No, I continued watching cartoons, and we lived there for several more years.
That's crazy. So that's, man, and you know, like you said, that wasn't a one-off experience. So
it wasn't at all. All of my experiences were similar to that. Nothing really more like extraordinary than that, but my mom
nothing corporeal.
No. But my mom had a ton of experiences. She saw an apparition. She heard tons of noise. Like she would wake up in the middle of the night and it would sound like there was like a party happening in my brother and I's room upstairs. She would hear like Victrola music and people like chatting, like, socializing, and she would go up there and we would be asleep and it would be pitch black. It was like there was a lot of activity in that house.
Was it like a Victorian house?
It wasn't. It was an early. It was built in the early 1900s. It was a farmhouse, but it was built on the foundation of what I think was a Victorian house that had burnt at some point, and they salvaged the foundation and then just built a new house on top of it. So it was like,
that'll do it.
What was your mom's reaction to all this? Like, what was her comfort level?
She was like surprising, and we talk about it a lot. I've written about it in the magazine, and we've talked about it within the last year or so. And then and now, she has always been surprisingly chill about it. She was like, as I said, she was a single mom, so her focus was just like sort of like
getting through.
She didn't have time for that shit. Basically,
too tired for ghosts. Yeah,
whatever.
Dude, that's
exactly.
True.
Like she told me she woke up a couple of times, like in the dead of winter, and like the thermostat was like jammed all the way to the lowest temperature, and she would like reset it, go back to bed. She would wake up cold again. It was the same thing. And she said one time she just like yelled to nobody, like, knock it off. Like, I've got to get some sleep. My kid's got to, whatever, like went back to bed. That was sort of just how she always handled it. She just like, it was props to her because she made it seem like the most normal thing in the world. And that's probably why I'm as weird as I am now, I guess.
Right. Those ghosts love it cold, don't they?
They do, yeah. They sure do.
It's probably someone who's like, "What is this contraption? Let's build a fire. You're supposed to warm a house up with a fire."
Totally.
Man,
go on,
I was just going to
Bryce.
ask, how did you and your brother take it? What was the mood of that sort of paranormal activity throughout the years for you guys? Was it pretty terrifying, or did you learn to adapt with it? Or
I think we learned to live with it. I was always like a pretty serious little kid, and my brother was a little bit more lighthearted. So he would tease me about it, and like we would joke about it. And I don't ever remember being like afraid in that house, but I do remember taking it seriously. Like, wow, like this is a thing that's here. And then like, we had cousins who were like our age, and when they found out about it, it was like everybody's favorite thing. It's like, oh, can we like sleep over? Do you think we'll see the ghost?
Really?
Like, do you think the ghost will come out? Like everybody, it became like, sort of an attraction at our house.
Any sense? Your mother said she saw something. What did she see?
So her bedroom, like weirdly didn't have any windows in it, which is creepy enough in itself. It was like the people who lived there previously had done some renovations, and what I was told is that the father of the previous family like worked like the night shift. I believe he worked at like
this already sounds bad. Yeah, this is how ghosts get started. Yeah, this is
100%. I believe he worked at one of like the GM plants because we weren't too far from Flint. Mm-hmm. And they did these renovations, and he worked third shift. He worked the overnight shift. Decided he wasn't going to put windows in the master bedroom so he could sleep during the day when he got home.
Right.
So that guy ended up having a heart attack on the job.
Oh,
and
my God.
My mom was pretty convinced that he was one of the spirits there, and she thought the other was this other woman who had died in the original house, and she had somehow tracked down some information that this woman had died of like diphtheria, which is like it's something to do with like the nose and throat, some sort of respiratory thing. So she would hear like wheezing and shit like that in the night. That is terrifying.
Oh yeah, that's no good.
Back to when she saw the apparition, she's in her bedroom that has no windows, and she said she woke up and it looked like there was like a single car headlight shining like directly onto her bed, and there's no windows in the room. And as her eyes adjusted, she made out like the backlit silhouette of a figure. And it didn't say anything. It didn't do anything. It just stood there. And she like was trying to, was like blinking her eyes to try to get them to focus and adjust quicker. And it just like sort of dissipated, and that was it.
Jeez.
But that was like, I mean, she has so many, many good stories. My favorite is like this. There was in the kitchen, there was this old, original, like built-in cabinet that was original to the farmhouse when it was built in like 1910 or whenever. And she said she would hear like tapping from inside of it often. And one day she came home, and she actually had worked the night shift at the time, which sounds like a setup for Amityville or something, like after that other guy did and died doing it.
Totally.
But so she came home, and there was a teenage girl next door who would babysit my brother and I. She would just sleep over when my mom worked the night shift. And she gets home and she like wakes the babysitter up, and the babysitter's getting ready, and my mom's getting ready to walk her home next door. And they're in the kitchen, and the babysitter's putting her shoes on, and like my mom starts to hear the tapping from the inside of this old cabinet that she had heard before. And my mom said she was like pretty cranky and like irritable that day. She was like tired and, had whatever going on. And she was like waiting for the babysitter to like look up and acknowledge this noise. And the girl didn't. And my mom started to think like, is this me? Like, is this in my head? And she kind of got a little worked up, and she like asked this girl, like, don't you hear that? Like, don't you hear that noise, that knocking? And the girl was like, yeah, like, of course I hear that noise. And my mom was like, oh, well, like, you didn't react to it, and you've never said anything like about anything in this house. Like, I hear this all the time, and sometimes it makes me wonder if I'm crazy. And the girl was like, no, like, of course I know all about this house. My dad just told me I wasn't allowed to talk to you guys about it.
Whoa.
Shit.
Like, so like the neighborhood knew. And after the guy who had died on the job passed away and his family moved out, the house sat vacant for a number of years. And like eventually the neighbor told my mom that they would like see lights and hear noises, hear music as my mom did while the house was vacant, up until the point that my mom and dad and brother
and
moved
they
in.
just let her buy it anyway.
And they just let her buy it. You totally.
Thanks,
Now,
guys.
don't tell this nice single mother about the ghosts that live in the house with her small
Maybe she'll make
children.
it go away.
So yeah, that's like, I mean,
about the ghosts.
That was the situation that I was born into, and I don't think there was ever any other option for me to be into this shit.
Yeah. That's wild. I wonder, does your mom have any anecdotes or anything about like, I love the idea that there used to be another structure standing in its place. It makes me curious if you saw or she saw like a ghost walking 5 feet above the ground, or in places where there used to be floors or walls or doors that are no longer there,
Oh yeah, that is a really interesting thought. She's never said anything specific like that, but I will certainly ask her next time I talk to her if that would make sense of anything that she saw, because that is a really, really good idea.
Are you guys all out of the house now? What's the current situation with that place?
Yeah. So
of course.
My mom moved out in, I think, 1992 or 93, somewhere around there. So it's been a while. But one more like quip, when she was moving out before, like when she had an offer on the house, they had to get an inspection done, and there was there was this light fixture
like
in
fingers crossed. Like,
God, please, exactly.
Please.
There was this light fixture in her bedroom where she had seen that light apparition, and it needed some sort of repair, and she had an electrician out. And so the electrician like goes into the basement, and it was like super old farmhouse. It was like those old fashioned, those really large fuses, like the big circular fuses you pull out. So he like opens it up, he pulls the fuses out, disconnects the power so he can work on this light fixture, safely. And he goes back up there, and my mom's like, watching him as he does his work, and he's like doing something, and all of a sudden like the bare bulb that's just like hanging there by the wire like lights up like 6 inches from his face. And he's like, he asked my mom, like, did you turn the power back on? And she was like, no, of course not. And he was just like, what the hell? And she was like, whoa, yeah, you think you could fix it? Or, I got to sell this house.
Yeah, I've got a crucifix right here and some holy water I always keep on me.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it was like literally up until she moved out that she was experiencing activity there.
God damn.
It must have been... I was going to say, it must have been weird to move into a house that wasn't haunted after that.
Yeah, totally. She's commented on that and said that, for a while she would like, couldn't tell if she was actually experiencing things or if it was like her brain or she was like expecting things to happen that weren't happening. And yeah, I mean, since then she has not, has not lived in another, active house like that, but it's certainly left an impression on all of us.
Man, that is wild. Yeah, because you're trying to figure it out. You're like, did all that stuff actually happen? I mean, am I causing this? Is is my situation? Was this here before? I mean, you must be trying to like understand what's happening. I mean, that's just a common human reaction. That's a wild story. You know, in California, you have to reveal by law if the place is haunted upon
That's
closing.
right. Yeah.
So
Wait,
you can
what?
actually.
I thought it was just if someone died in it.
No. Like there's a haunting clause, I think, in California real estate.
Wait a minute.
Law. I
think you're right, Bryce. Yeah.
No, I swear. If you have to like, if a potential buyer asks the seller if there's been any hauntings or if the place is haunted,
I knew that was in New Orleans, but in California,
they have to disclose it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
I think that is true. I've read that before. There was a case, like someone won a case over it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but man. Because we just got to stop the passing around of haunted places, guys. We just keep passing them along, and it's a real problem.
Did it ever feel like a threatening presence when you guys were there? Or was it more something that you just sort of like lived with?
No. Excuse me. I never felt it threatening at all, and my mom says she never did too. It was sort of, I think, like the most
That's
like
good.
poltergeisty thing that ever happened was, as I said, when the thermostat would get turned all the way down. But otherwise, like, no, nothing really. She did say she would, the woman who I spoke of, who she was pretty sure died in the original structure that was there, she would hear her like wailing and like wheezing because she died of this like respiratory illness, and that was like, she said that was by far the most terrifying of anything that she saw or heard. But like nothing ever, nothing like malevolent ever that she was aware of.
I really don't appreciate the tapping from inside a cabinet.
No.
That is really disturbing to me because it makes me think that the ghost has folded itself up into a tiny space and is poking with their feet. Like, that is weird. That's weird. I mean, all of this is weird, but that's weird to me.
It's super weird. And I wonder, I mean, maybe that is exactly what you were talking about. Maybe that's an example of like, once the structure had changed, you know, that was something different previously. I don't know. But yeah, no, that's really weird. That feels like, I feel like a lot of what my mom experienced there, like, could be classified as like a residual haunting, but some of it, especially that, feels like it was trying to get someone's attention or something.
Yeah. That's like the Bell Witch stuff. It started with the taps. You know what I mean?
Don't say
totally.
that. Oh wait, they're through it. God, I got
But I'm just saying, like, and then they would tap back, and then suddenly it was speaking with them. You know what I mean? It's good that did your mom ever try communicating with it other than to tell them to stop turning the heat down?
No, I don't think she did. No, I mean, I think she just kept, you know, moving on and hoping that it would continue to just be a small nuisance and not anything greater.
Yeah.
The spooky old-timey Victrola music is like very on the nose. Like, that's pretty much dragging chains and like
100%. Yes, like 100%. That feels like, that's like out of
playing the hits, Riley. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's like the what was the James Wan movie? Which one was it with the little boy running through the house with the Victrola music playing? The one with the guy with the keys. Patrick Wilson, he can astral project. What, Insidious?
Oh, okay.
yeah.
I don't think
really creepy. So how did you then move out of this haunted life or young childhood? You said you had no choice. So how did the supernatural affect you as you grew up, and then finally you were like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do, or I'm gonna get into this?
I think it was, you know, similar segues that every kid who like was born in the born in the 80s, lived through the 90s. It was like Unsolved Mysteries and X-Files, you know, kept my interest peaked. You know, sadly, I didn't get into Twin Peaks until I was older, so I can't.
Neither.
I you know, but there was enough at the time in the zeitgeist that like kept me interested. And then it wasn't anything like when I was, you know, super young, it wasn't anything beyond watching those shows and reading like Goosebumps books. But then when I became like a teenager and you know, had a little bit more freedom, it was like, you know, ghost hunting at the cemetery past our curfew, that sort of thing. And sort of just like continued from there. And it's not, you know, I certainly haven't been doing it as long as a lot of people who I respect in this field have been doing it, but like it's been, you know, something that I've always come back to, and then in recent years have sort of leaned into a little bit more. So
what were the local ghost stories, cryptids, legends in the area of Michigan that you were growing up in?
So where I was a kid, there wasn't anything major, but when I went to college in like Lansing and East Lansing, Michigan, there was more stuff around there. Probably the biggest, the one that left the biggest impression on me was in Bath, Michigan, which is like tiny little town in the middle of nowhere. And in like the 20s or the late teens, there was like a disgruntled father who sadly like put a bunch of TNT in the basement of an elementary school and blew it up. And it was like, I mean, late 90s, early 2000s, it was sort of like the largest school disaster tragedy in the country. Like many young children died, like 5-year-olds to 10-year-olds, like a couple dozen.
Heard this story.
It's the Bath School massacre is if you wanted to look it up, and it was such a sad story. It was, this dad was like, he was just like disgruntled because like his property taxes were getting raised or something, and he like, this was his way of like getting back at the community, was like going after their children. It's super sad story.
May 18th, 1927.
Yeah. So where that school was supposed to be a hot zone that I would go check out often. And then there, close by, there was like the cemetery where a lot of these children were buried. And that was supposed to be like a hot spot as well. So that was like one of my favorite pieces of local lore for sure. That, obviously it's an incredibly tragic story, but as far as like, a spooky place to go check out in the middle of the night, that was the top of the list.
Any cryptids, any Bigfoot activity in Michigan where you're, I mean
there's some, there's always some Bigfoot activity, but I think there's more reported Dogman activity than Bigfoot. The Michigan Dogman.
That was my next question.
Michigan Dogman.
Yeah. So, I haven't had any Dogman experiences, but certainly heard about them, read about them on many different types of forums online over the years. I mean, I feel like that, and then the Nain Rouge in Detroit are like the two legends. Nain Rouge is sort of not really a cryptid. He was like, he kind of was. Are you guys familiar with that legend?
Not ringing a bell.
Yeah, no.
It's like this little. He's like like the Red Devil, little Red Devil.
What?
In Detroit.
Yes,
I
have.
Nain
Yes.
Rouge.
Yes. This may have come up briefly on the show a couple years ago. Please go on, because this is one that I know I came across someone. Oh, this is interesting. Let me come back to this, and clearly forgot. Go, please. I'm excited.
I mean, I am certainly not the most qualified guest to speak on it. Your boy John Tenney knows much more about the Nain Rouge than I do, because there's like this every year as sort of like a joke. There's this parade in Detroit where it's like, kick the Nain Rouge out of Detroit, and Tenney started like the anti movement of that, where they were protesting to like let the devil stay in Detroit.
Oh, no way. Oh man, that's awesome.
Yeah, he's talked about it a bunch. I think it just happened in March, the last one. I saw some photos of it, but basically it's like the red dwarf that was this creature in Detroit who was like said to be, sort of like in a similar way of like Mothman. It was like, if you saw him, you were going to experience something terrible, basically. The main story around it is about the founder of Detroit, whose name, I can't remember his first name, but his surname was Cadillac.
Antoine de la Mothe Cadillac.
That is the one. And he was like told by a fortune teller that one day he was going to cross paths with the Nain Rouge, this Red Devil, and that he needed to treat it with respect. And when that day came, it's said that Cadillac like hit the devil out of the way with his cane and was like, get out of my way. and he was like, he had like horrible luck after that. I feel like he lost his fortune, and I think he eventually moved out of Detroit, and like this empire he had built like sort of crumbled, and it's said that it was because
that little red devil.
Exactly. Yeah.
Out of the way, devil.
If you're warned by a fortune teller that you're going to meet a little devil and you have to be nice to it, like, how do you not?
Come on. Yeah.
Like, come on. You had. It
The
was so
advice
easy.
was right there.
All you had to do.
Yeah, he's
totally
associated with
fair.
a luton or a lighton, a type of hobgoblin in French folklore and fairy tales. Plays a similar role in the folklore of Normandy to household spirits in England. Yeah, he's like a little goblinly, devilish guy.
That's cool, man. We got to do a story on that.
I think we just did.
Done.
I've got
Year of
friends in-
manifestation.
I have friends in Detroit, and I'm always telling them, like, please keep your ear to the ground. Like, if someone has like a modern day Nain Rouge encounter, like, I need to hear about it because I want to know what that dude's been up to. It's been a while.
So tell us a little bit about your work with the zine, the podcast, and if you've had any experiences as an adult that you can't explain.
So yeah, the Strange Days is the little DIY magazine zine that I do most of the writing for and do all of the publishing and editing for. And it started out 2 years ago as a quarantine project. I sort of realized when I went into lockdown, I was with my partner in Brooklyn, and it was, I sort of realized that at one point she was getting sick of me reading or telling her about like all the weird shit that I was reading to occupy my time while we were like stuck at home. And so one day I was like sitting on the couch and I have some like old Fate magazines on a bookshelf, and I was like, I could probably do a half-hearted attempt at something like that. So I like sat down on the computer, like 6 hours later, had volume 1 of Strange Days, didn't even let anybody read it or copy edit it, which proved to be a huge mistake, but just like put the last period on it and hit send to a printer.
Love that.
And ordered like 50 copies, or not even 50. I think I ordered 30 copies, and then like asked like 12 of my friends for their mailing address. Didn't tell them why, just sent it to them totally unsolicited.
Cool.
Got like, decent feedback for it, decided to do a second issue. And when the second issue came out, I started like a social media presence for it, and it sort of piqued the interest of like enough people that I actually like oversold the second issue, and then just like kept making them from there. And currently, issue 9 is being printed, so doing it like quarterly. It's not my full-time job, but and basically what it is, I guess I should have gotten to that sooner, is it's just like this little pocket-sized magazine that's like a collection of any and all weird paranormal, ufology, cryptozoology, occult, like folklore, mythology, any interesting current event stuff, or just like, something that piques my interest and I want to do a little bit of a deep dive on, even if it's not a current event, just anything weird and fun that falls under that umbrella. And, I get contributors from all over the world, illustrators, like poets. The last issue we had like a graphic artist do like a one-off comic for it about the Bell Witch that is super cool. And yeah, it's just like anything fun and weird, we put it out and send it out into the world, and people seem to dig it, or at least they humor me in that way. So, and then that eventually so one of the main contributors to that is my friend Ian Schneider, who's also from New York. And once we started putting out more issues, we realized that like, because we keep it kind of short, it's not like the most in-depth thing because it's supposed to be pretty light entertainment reading sort of thing,
right?
But we realized that we were leaving like a lot of meat on the bone with some of the stories, so we started doing a podcast that would sort of be in tandem. So like we would pick topics from the zine and do like more of a deep dive, and that has sort of slowed down quite a bit, sadly, just because it's not what either of us are doing full time. But like we're hoping to play catch up a little bit more this summer. But yeah, so like that's what the Strange Days zine is, and then the Strange Dispatch is the sister podcast to it.
That's so great. Yeah, definitely need to check
fans
that
will love it too.
out. Yeah, for sure. So if people want to are there like back issues, or how can people get a hold of the magazine currently?
Yeah. Currently, all issues are available, 1 through 8, and then the 9th issue will be available very soon. If you go to strangedayszine.com, that's Strange Days, Days, Zine is Zine.com. You can find links to everything on there. The podcast, the shop, it's all there in one spot. And yeah, I mean, it's and we also accept contributions always. If anybody has a strange story that they want to put out in the world, or like a haunted recipe or a movie review or something, anything weird, we're down to put in the magazine. So you can hit us up.
That's awesome. All right. Definitely do that. I'll put that in the link in the show notes as well. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, it's time to play Bullshit or Believe It with Andrew Juhl. All right, we are joined this week by Haunted Baby, Andrew Juhl, former Haunted Baby, I guess I should say. Andrew, if you've listened to the show, you know that we have a game that we like to play with our guests. I'm going to go down a list of phenomena. If you're open to it, you're going to say believe it. If you're closed off to it, you're going to say bullshit. There's no in between. You have to pick one or the other. But of course, we can always circle back and revisit some of these topics on the list after we get through it rapid fire style. This is a game called Bullshit
or Believe It.
Andrew, on your mark, get set, ghosts.
Believe it.
Bigfoot.
Believe it.
Aliens.
Believe it.
The Bermuda Triangle.
Bullshit.
Parallel dimensions.
Believe it.
Psychic vampires.
For sure, believe it.
Spontaneous combustion.
Believe it.
Astral projection.
Believe it.
Ouija boards.
Believe it.
Alien abduction.
Believe it.
Dogman.
Absolutely believe it.
Mothman.
Oh yeah, believe it.
Sheep squatch.
I'm sorry, I'm going to lose some readers for this, but I'm going to say bullshit.
Ritual magic with a K.
Believe it.
Levitation.
Bullshit.
The healing power of crystals.
Listen, you do you, but it is probably bullshit.
We're living in a simulation.
I'm going to say bullshit.
The government is hiding the truth about Elvis.
Bullshit.
Alien human hybrids.
Believe it.
Miracles.
Believe it.
Reincarnation.
Believe it.
Destiny.
Bullshit.
Life after death.
I've been dreading this one.
Haven't we all?
I will say, I feel like I'll just say believe it to be safe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Take the insurance.
Would you consider ghosts to be a form of life after death?
I don't know. See, that's like, I've had this conversation so many times. I really don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, I believe in ghosts, and I know it's a contradiction to say I don't believe in life after death.
Not necessarily
that.
You don't have to subscribe to the idea that they're the souls of, dead people. It could be some other form of energy or something.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah,
Right.
like the whole imprint echo kind of theory.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well done, though.
Yeah, very well done.
Generally a believer across the board. pretty
Yes.
much.
Yeah, I feel like
Fantastic work.
if your listeners were hoping for a more controversial version of that game, I just wasn't the right contestant.
That's
for it.
fair. Every now and then we need a Bryce to come through and play this just to keep the as a control.
That's right. I was with you.
Got a for sure on psychic vampires. Sounds like someone's been a victim.
Oh yeah, I mean, haven't we all? I mean, I feel like, I'm not going to name names, but there are some in my life for sure.
Just draining a lot of your energy.
Definitely.
Yeah. And then let's talk a little bit about Dogman for people who might be listening to this show for the first time and are like, what the fuck are they talking about? Because Dogman was one that I made fun of when we started this show. And then after speaking with Linda S. Godfrey, I was and reading some of her books, I'm like, I mean, why not? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Why
and
not?
Totally.
And then reading about the, George Knapp's book about the attack at the Pentagon, about the dogmen and those accounts of people that had visited Skinwalker Ranch, and then all of a sudden we're seeing fucking dogmen in their backyard. Like, what do you think's going on with this, Andrew?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like it took me a long time to get on board with Dogman as well. I've read some of Linda's work. She's obviously the authority on that subject. I don't know. I mean, I don't. That would be my answer if you asked me what was going on with any of those things.
Right.
But
Yeah, totally,
especially Dogman. I feel like I feel like some of those things I have like a toe touching the ground in my own weird head, even if it's not. Obviously, I don't know anything, but like there are things. There is enough information about Sasquatch and ghosts and things like that that I feel there is something there that keeps me grounded. Dogman, I don't have that with, but I do think that there's something to it. I mean, it's like, people always say, even if one experience is true, then it's true, right? Like they don't all have to be true.
I feel like if I got Dogman, like if that's the cryptid that I saw out there, I'd be like, God damn it, why did it have to be Dogman? Because now I got to convince people I saw this. You know what I mean? Like, Bigfoot, you're like, no, man, I've seen it. But Dogman, you're like, oh, God.
To me, this like sort of, moves me in the little direction, like the Dogman thing, even the sheep squatch. And Andrew, I bet I could convince you on the Bermuda Triangle, but all
I'm
these
here.
sort
I'm
of
open to it.
Upright walking creatures, what once was Bigfoot seems to be the mainstay, but now you have these dogmen and whatever things. Perhaps this is, our collective unconscious psychic projection manifesting and remanifesting. Perhaps it's changing the appearance of not only UFOs, but the creatures we see on the ground. You know what I mean? There can't be that many like wolf creatures and Bigfoots all hiding out, all living off the land, right? I mean, there's got to be something else going on here, perhaps.
I that's where my brain is these days. It's like, like the Jacques Vallée stuff, the idea of that it's all the same phenomenon coming from who knows where. But I certainly feel like I subscribe to that camp more than a lot of things lately. Like I think that whether it's a tulpa that we're manifesting or whether it's just a new version of whatever that energy has manifested itself as before, be it Sasquatch, a fairy, Hopkinsville goblin or whatever it is. I do feel like there is some sort of link to all of that stuff for sure.
And it does seem that certain individuals are batteries for these things. Some people just are supercharged for these types of experiences.
I have a Dogman radio in my brain. Great. Thanks, biology.
Great. Thanks.
Can I tell you guys a really quick firsthand Dogman encounter that I was told recently?
Yes. And that reminds me, we got to talking about the zine. We never answered the question of whether you've had anything in your adult life.
Oh, yeah. Not anything major. So the one experience that I've had that I feel like I can present with feeling pretty certain about it, other than what happened in my childhood, was the Bath School Massacre, which we were talking about earlier. Well, I was with some friends, quote unquote investigating. And I don't say that because I don't believe in paranormal investigating. I just say it because we didn't know how to paranormal investigate while we were doing it. We were at the cemetery where all these children, were buried after this tragedy. And we had just gotten there and we were looking around and we couldn't find any. We were looking at graves of, dates that would match up to when this event happened. And we couldn't find any. And we were walking around this place for like 15 minutes and it's not a huge cemetery. And we were just like, strange. Like there's supposed to be a couple dozen of these children who are buried here. It's interesting that we haven't found any of them, and we were looking pretty diligently. It was me and two other friends. And I was taking pictures with a digital camera, and we're walking, and I pull the digital camera up to my eye and look through the viewfinder, and I take a picture, and the flash goes off, which I didn't mean for it to, but it just did. And as the image like pops up in the viewfinder for like the half a second of review after you take a photo, I noticed there was something in the photo that wasn't there that I could see with my eye. And so I'm trying to pull that up and hit play back on the camera. And while I'm doing that, my friend who's like 15 yards ahead of me, he was like, "Oh, I just hit like a cold spot. It feels really weird over here." And so I'm trying to pull this image up, and my camera batteries die, of course, like as they do in any of these scenarios. So we go back to the car. I think it was my car, not too far away, and I had extra batteries and swap them out and pull it up. And sure enough, there's like this crazy, like foggy, hazy something in the frame. I mean, it sort of looks like, you know, those like spiritualism, like seance photos where they like fake that active. Yes, it looks exactly like that. I will email it to you dudes.
Please do. We want to take a look at it. I'll throw it up on the Instagram if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
For people to look at.
It looks exactly like that. And then my friend who's in the background, the one who turned to me and said that he had just walked into a cold spot or something, he has, and I don't want to catch flack for this, and I certainly don't want you dudes to catch flack for this. I'm not going to say, he has an orb above his head. And orbs, if orbs were on bullshit or believe it, I would probably say bullshit. But in this photo, he has this thing above his head that is like, I don't know what it is, and it's 100% not the moon. The moon was like over my, like on my back, to my back. And it's just this like really compelling photo. So we see that on my camera. We go back to the spot where I took the photo, and we look down, and then like, of course, when I took it, I was standing over the grave of a little girl who died in that tragedy. And those were that's what we were looking for there. And it was we had been very diligently looking, and we hadn't found any, and that was the first and only one we had found up until that point. It's it's an interesting photo, and it's like I work with cameras for a living, for a profession, and like I know how they work pretty well, and I can't explain what happened in that scenario. It's not, I've like, if I could debunk it, I would 100% go that route, and I haven't been able to.
Andrew, I could get you over to Team Orb, no problem.
Yeah, this is an orb friendly.
I spend too much time on like paranormal subreddits,
right,
with like people who just like don't. You probably could.
Listen, this is an orb-free zone right now, okay, Bryce?
Man, that's a crazy story. I can't wait to see that picture.
Yeah, it's wild. And I haven't really had anything crazy after that. I've had a couple of minor things, but nothing major. I was even for a time I was a MUFON field investigator.
No way.
Cool.
But I pretty much, and this isn't this isn't speaking to my ability as a field investigator, and more so just the types of cases that MUFON gets. Like they were all the cases that I ever got were pretty easily debunked, like, by whatever, terrestrial things.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, not a lot, as of late, not a lot of weird experiences, but I am open. I am receptive to them for sure.
Well, it sounds like someone who's seen one of these dog men running around. So let's hear that.
This story is insane. So I was back in November of last year. I went to this event called CryptidCon in Lexington, Kentucky.
Sure.
And Strange Days set up a table there, and it's like, it's a lot of podcasters and like, makers and vendors, and there are like some dudes from Mountain Monsters. I think that's the show. Some of those dudes were there, and it's just like, people talking about cryptids for like a whole weekend. And on the second day, this guy comes up to me. His name was Scott, and he was like, he asked me what the magazine was, and I told him, we collect stories and firsthand encounters and things. And he's like, "Oh, I have a Dogman story." And I won't make it too long. And there's an episode of The Strange Dispatch, my podcast, that we go into it in depth. But he basically launches into this story. He says he lives in super rural Kentucky. And one day he was home for work, like midweek. It was like middle of the day, and his dog started barking like crazily, and he's really can't see his neighbors. There's no one around. Or actually, I'm sorry, I take that back. There was one neighbor, but it was like not super close. And so he's wondering, if someone pulled up in a car or whatever, why his dog's going wild. And he says he looks out his window and there's a dog man on his property in plain sight in the middle of the day. And the dog man like charges at his dog who's on like one of those like cable lines. And he says the dog man like bites down on his dog, and he goes and grabs a gun, like his handgun, goes out the front door, and the dog man, like he kicks open his front door just in time to see the dog man like kill his pet dog.
No.
And yes, he said it like chomped it. He said it just like chomped it and it stopped moving. And so this dude says, and sorry, this gets a little bit more graphic. He says he unloads like 5 shots into the side of this dog man, and the dog man takes off into the woods, and this dude Scott follows, chasing him down on foot. He's upset because he just watched it kill his dog, and he follows it like into the woods, like 1,000 yards into the woods, and the brush is getting thicker and thicker. And he said that he just like all of a sudden found himself in the way that he described it. I will never forget. He said he found himself in the dogman's lair, and it was a boneyard.
What?
He described it as a boneyard, which he said it was just like, but he said like there were deer and bear and bones that he didn't even know what they were, just everywhere, like littering the ground.
Man.
And he was getting ready to like shoot at the dogman again, but the dogman kind of scurried out of sight. And then he realized that he thought it was getting ready to like circle around and come back and lunge at him. And he like took off, and he also said, so then he went on to say that he also has Sasquatch on his property. And he believes that the dogman has never hassled him again because he has a good relationship with the Sasquatch, and they sort of protect him from the dogman harassing him, basically. But it's like the most insane dogman story I've ever heard.
Dogman bad?
There's like very bad. There's like a supernatural element, right? When he sort of like loses time, misses space, ends up in fairy, and then all of a sudden he's in the cave, right? Like there's something weird there.
Yeah,
there's like
he's just like running, and all of a sudden he finds himself like in the lair of the dog bed.
You've tripped into fairyland.
Super weird. And he had his wife was with him, and she was carrying this binder, and she had these these printed photos, and they didn't have photos of the dogman, but they had photos of a lot of blood on their property that he said that like when he unloaded on it. So I don't know.
Get the blood,
weird.
Clone the dogman. I've said it before. Let's clone Bigfoot.
God.
Let's clone dogman and prove they exist.
Man, there's
cloning
like
cryptids. This is a brilliant idea.
All over North America. I mean, they're not there's not a lot of them like that, but they are out there, which, I mean, yeah, imagine the potential for gathering evidence on a site like that, being able to visit him like right after that encounter, if he were to report it to somewhere, or if there was an agency like MUFON for UFOs, but for like cryptids, like Dogman reportings, and they, boom, you send out an investigate, whatever. I don't know.
So was he unable to keep track
Bryce,
of
I think you can start that agency if you want to.
That's true. Was he unable to keep track of where this lair actually was then?
I mean, the way he described it, he could never make his way back there, basically.
Right. Because it doesn't exist in our reality. He entered a different reality. Yes.
Sheesh.
The dogman, he followed the dogman into that reality. That's how it works. You follow these things.
If there was a lot of fog, maybe that's what happened. You go through the fog, and then I don't know. I hate Dogman now. That's all I know. So
you made a couple enemies tonight, right? Damn.
Yeah.
I like the idea of the neighborhood Squatch Watch. That's like pretty cool.
Yeah.
Very into that.
That's a t-shirt.
Neighborhood Squatch Watch. It's just a friendly Bigfoot giving a thumbs up.
Yeah. It's like with binoculars, like looking out for dogmen. Pretty great.
Love it. All right, well, it is time, Andrew, for this week's story of high strangeness. You guys ready for this?
Sure, let's do it.
All right,
Very
I tried to
ready.
find a weird one for 420. Not as psychedelic as it could be. It's not, crazy, but this is one of the weirder cryptids that I've ever heard of. So, Riley, cue up some music and let's get into this.
Here we go.
A strange phenomenon, a horrible apparition hovers over the city at an early hour this morning.
That was the headline of a sensational story printed in the Crawfordsville Daily Journal on the evening of September 5th, 1891. Settled on the banks of Sugar Creek in 1823, Crawfordsville, Indiana, was a little slice of Americana, complete with a historic downtown square and courthouse. The county seat of Montgomery County, in 1891, the population of Crawfordsville was just over 6,000. And in the early days of September of that year, the population would temporarily increase by 1, as the town was visited by a mysterious cryptid known as the Crawfordsville Monster. Unlike other small town entities we've covered on this podcast, the Crawfordsville Monster was not an earthbound bipedal beast lurking in the tall grass near a lake, or tossing tires off a bluff, or dodging pickup trucks speeding down rural highways. The Crawfordsville Monster descended from the sky, exhibiting similar behavior to that of the legendary Snallygaster, frightening unsuspecting citizens and spreading confusion across the county. Some said that the beast's appearance signaled the start of the end times. Others had less fanatical theories or explanations to the creature's true nature. Whatever it was, the Crawfordsville Monster case is a fun reminder that not all unidentified flying objects are silver discs or mystery airships. They sometimes come in the form of sentient beings. That is, if you believe what you read in the paper.
I do.
The whole matter began at 2 a.m. on September 5th. As the rest of the town slept peacefully in their beds, 2 ice delivery men, Marshall McIntyre and Bill Gray, were prepping their delivery wagon in a barn off East Main Street near downtown. McIntyre suddenly felt overcome with a sense of what he described as awe and dread. He looked off to the western sky and saw a horrible apparition flying towards them at about 300 or 400 feet in the air. The Daily Journal reported the sight in their evening story later that day.
It was most gruesome in aspect. It was about 18 feet long and 8 feet wide and moved rapidly through the air by means of several pairs of side fins. It was pure white and had no definite shape or form, resembling somewhat a great white shroud fitted with propelling fins. There was no tail or head visible, but there was one great flaming eye, and a sort of wheezing, plaintive sound was emitted from a mouth which was invisible. It flapped like a flag in the winds as it came on, and frequently gave a great squirm as though suffering unutterable agony.
Now, have you ever heard of this cryptid, Andrew?
No, I am not familiar.
Some horrible flying worm that seems to be squirming in pain.
Yeah, with fins. Hell yeah.
Yeah, with
In one
fins.
eye.
That's
One
awesome.
eye. Yes. The one-eyed, sentient, screaming windsock flew above the 2 men's heads, drawing lazy circles in the air and emitting its agonizing cry. Worried the creature might eat them, the ice delivery men dashed into the barn, where they watched the creature for several minutes, twisting and twirling in the air. After some time, the monster flew off to the east, but when it reached the city limits, it made a U-turn and flew back to McIntyre and Gray's location. Now, the barn where the men prepped their wagon belonged to their boss, a man named William Martin. Martin and his family were asleep in their house next door. When the creature returned, it hovered over the Martin family home. McIntyre proposed they go grab the family and get them to safety, but Gray, perhaps out of fear, objected. So the 2 men watched the strange aerial phenomenon for an hour before finally escaping in the wagon to the ice house. When they returned to the barn after daylight, the creature had vanished. Convinced what they'd witnessed had been of supernatural origins, McIntyre and Gray told the Daily Journal that they would be returning to the barn the next morning armed with a Springfield rifle.
Hell yeah.
Because that's how you take care of a ghost. You shoot it with a bullet.
Damn right.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was this idea. They thought it was more like a ghost in not, in context. They weren't thinking of this thing as necessarily an animal. They thought it was some type of spirit, perhaps.
Yeah, totally. With a flaming eye straight out of the Bible, man. That's crazy shit.
Now, that may have been all that was said of the matter, and we would have had to take the word of two Icemen at the early hours of the morning. That is, if another witness hadn't come forth. Reverend of the First Methodist Church, G.W. Schweitzer, stepped out of his house just after midnight that night to fetch some water from his well. Like Marshall McIntyre, the Reverend was overcome with a strange sensation. Not sure if he had heard or saw anything to prompt him, Schweitzer nonetheless peered into the sky and saw the creature swooping in his direction in the windless night air. The Reverend estimated that the being was about 16 feet long and 8 feet wide and resembled a floating drapery. Okay. According to his eyewitness testimony, Schweitzer summed up the creature's appearance with this. It was shaped like a fleecy milk-white cloud or a demon in a shroud.
Nice. Those are like two very different things, right? It's like,
I know, yeah.
It's like it was a milky white fleece or a demon in a shroud. It was
flying drapes. Now, Schweitzer
floating drapery is really good. I like that.
Resembling floating drapery. Schweitzer called his wife outside, and the pair watched as the monster writhed around in the sky in a fashion that reminded them of the slithering of a serpent. At one point, it seemed to descend and land upon the lawn of their neighbor, one Mrs. Lane. With the creature now blocked from view, Schweitzer hurried out into the street for a better angle, and just as soon as he did, the beast reappeared, rising back into the quiet night sky. Together, they watched the mysterious spook circle the town until Mrs. Schweitzer got tired and went back to bed.
These parents, man, they're wiped out. I'm telling you.
Yeah. She's just like, I can't. How long am I supposed to watch this thing floating around, crying, and not really doing anything?
That was like Dawn when I showed her that orange orb on Halloween. Great. Can we go now? Did you get your picture? Good. Get in the car.
Now, for those of you out there who wonder why more people don't come forward with their eyewitness accounts of high strangeness, consider this reaction to Schweitzer's story. Remember, he's a minister. Immediately, people, I guess ministers are just humans too, but, at the time I felt like they were held in high regard. Immediately, people started calling him drunk and crazy. Schweitzer started receiving multiple letters asking him for more information, and one of the letters allegedly sent from Keeley's Institute for Inebriates in Plainfield suggested that their inmates often saw floating spooks, but after a few days of treatment, no longer had that issue. They furthermore suggested that Schweitzer come down to the Institute and check himself in.
That's so fucked up, man.
Yeah, very passive-aggressive.
Yeah. The story of the Midnight Spook was picked up by the press in Indianapolis and Brooklyn and began to spread. Concerned citizens began wondering if the creature appeared in the daytime, what color it might be. Would it come to Ohio? Others wrote into the Daily Journal saying, with an air of self-satisfaction, that the beast was the harbinger of the final day and that the events of Revelations would soon be upon them all.
And upon the opening of the sixth seal, a floating drapery.
At least two possible explanations for the Crawfordsville monster were put forward. The first was, it was a flock of birds. Two eyewitnesses named John Hornbeck and Abe Hernley allegedly tracked the flying creature, only to discover it was a confused flock of killdeer, possibly thrown off by the newly implemented electric lights throughout the city. The white breasts and wings of the birds provided the ghostly appearance, and their calls could explain the cries of the beast. But what about that flaming eyeball?
Yeah.
Another explanation put forth was that the monster was actually, get ready everybody, a balloon.
Classic.
Apparently,
Classic indeed.
local kids, boys specifically, had been recently tying cats to parachutes and then sending them up into the sky in balloons, much to the dismay of the four-legged furry creatures. This trend, known as the quote-unquote balloon parachute craze, is just one more example that it was just a balloon explanation has been with us long before Roswell.
Well, and also that's like the beginning of TikTok right there. Like,
Yeah, I
got
got the
balloon challenge.
pre-internet craze, the balloon parachute craze. I guess this is what the boys were doing, or bored children were doing around town. So, what exactly was the Crawfordsville monster? A lost dragon from another dimension? A ghost? An organic spacecraft? Birds? A cat in a parachute? Floating drapes? We'll never know. But it serves as a reminder to check in with the sky every now and then, especially if you get that funny feeling. Because if you look up, you never know what you might see.
Nice.
Yeah.
Now, Andrew, anything about this story that jumps out at you or rings any bells? And there's no right answer to this. I'm just curious.
What did you say? What year it was? I'm sure you did.
1891, yeah.
So this is like before the mystery airship flap.
Yeah, this predates
not too far before.
No, and the things that I thought of was the fins, because they would associate mystery airships as sometimes having like those flaps, like those steampunk wings or oars.
Platypus flaps, yeah.
Yeah, but this definitely seems... It also reminds me of like stories from medieval times when people would say... You would hear stories that like, they walked outside and they saw a sky serpent flying around,
Totally. I would be probably most satisfied if it was in fact like an interdimensional dragon, or however you described it. That would be the best answer.
That'd be fun.
I think.
I think this is also a case that Charles Fort investigated as well. This was one of his early cases of strange phenomena. I think he went down there and asked around about it. But I think people took, the other thing is that with mystery ships as well, is like sometimes local newspapers just liked to print up these stories to help sell papers. But it seems weird that they would throw the reputation of a minister under the bus doing it.
Totally.
I know. What if this was like a precursor to the dirigible flap, and they're like, "I'm a scary white drapery."
Yeah,
and like it's not working with them down there. They're just sending them to drunk tanks. So maybe we should try some ships or something.
Punch it up a bit.
Punch it up, something with some panache.
Yeah, maybe they were witnessing sort of the evolutionary step of it going from a dragon to an airship, and then eventually to a silver disc. Whatever this, Jacques Vallée.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
Explanation is. And the flaming eyeball, that also sounds like an orb as well, since we're on the topic of orbs.
That's got to be the last pastor that ever reports any strange phenomenon.
Yeah.
Right? They're like, no, it was a normal day here this Sunday. That's nothing happened.
Yeah.
Anyways, back to Sky God's son.
Yeah. Exactly. Strange story. I think it's fun. It's so strange too that in these early stories they're like, it's a spook, it's a ghost, it's a demon,
Man.
But apparently never seen again.
I don't think it was birds.
I really hope it wasn't cats on balloons.
No,
That just bums me out.
Yeah, it really bums me out too.
I love that, like the uniqueness and the one-offness of it. It's so cool. Like there's so much there that I have not heard of in any of these other stories, whether they were like embellished or not. It's very unique and very cool.
Yeah. I came across this creature while flipping back through All Such Boardman's book, An Illustrated History of UFOs, and there was a page where he had drawn this thing, and I was like, what is that? I need to go look this up and find out what's behind this story. You know what he kind of looks like in my mind is like Valcor from, or is it Balcor?
Yeah.
Balcor or Valcor from
Never
Ending Story.
Yeah, man. Which we're
Totally.
going to talk about next on our Patreon, because Wolfgang Peterson directed Never-Ending Story, and
That's
also
right.
the 85 hit friendship buddy space movie Enemy Mine.
Yeah, everybody tune in Friday to The Other Side for that. Any final thoughts about this, Andrew?
I'm in. I'm sold on it. I think it was real. That's all it takes
Cool.
for me. I think you should add it to Bullshit or Believe It, honestly.
Great. All right.
That's
The Crawfordsville Monster. We won't have to stop and explain that one every time.
No,
I like this idea. Give Michael a minute to sell the Crawford Monster.
Yeah.
It's such a cool, unique story. I will definitely be looking into it further. I don't know. Whatever was happening in the skies in the late Victorian age, it sounds cool, and I wish I could have seen it.
The cool thing about this story too is all this information came from the original news articles, which are well preserved, and so I'm glad that occurred as well.
That's
so
great.
It's easy to find the chain of events in the original source material. So go check it out. Andrew, Juhl, it was so lovely having you on the show.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. Remind everybody where you can be found and where people can find your work.
Sure, yeah. Strange Days Zine, ZINE.com, links to all of our stuff. You can also find us on Instagram and Twitter. Same thing, Strange Days Zine. Thank you so much for having me. The pleasure was mine. I assure you this has been a lot of fun. Huge fan of the show. Super honored to be on with you dudes. Like, can't say it enough.
Well, thanks.
You, man. We appreciate the hell out of that. Thank you,
The
man.
pleasure is ours. And you'll have to come back sometime and maybe listen to some of the L-File stories that we get sent in. We'd love to hear
That'd be
your
great.
take.
Oh, absolutely.
on that stuff.
I would be so down.
Great. Guys, let's wrap it up with a couple plugs. Remember, we talked about it a second ago. You can support the show every month by going over to the Patreon, BCC The Other Side at patreon.com/BigfootCollectorsClub for $5 a month. You get 3 bonus episodes at a minimum. $9 tier, the ultra terrestrial tier gets you access to Riley's Cosmic Tracks every week. Some really cool stuff happening there. This Friday, we will be discussing the 1985 movie starring Louis Gossett Jr. and Dennis Quaid, Enemy Mine. A Bryce pick if I ever saw one. Very excited to talk about that. Check out my other podcast, Slate Your Name, available wherever you get your podcasts. Bryce, Riley, what do you got?
Sure. If this isn't enough Bigfoot for you, come over to Travel Channel on Sunday nights, 10, 9 Central. Watch Expedition Bigfoot, also streaming on Discovery Plus.
Hosted by none other than Bryce Johnson.
That's right. Our famous Bigfoot hunting adventurer. I just want to double down on the ultra terrestrial tier of the Patreon. It's like pretty much become like my podcast OnlyFans or something.
Yeah, it really has been. You get a letter every week from Riley. Sometimes he's sharing music from this show. Sometimes he's sharing music from his heart.
Yeah, it's like but there's stuff there that I'm not putting out anywhere else. Some of it's songwriting, some of it's ambient music, some of it's just I'm playing piano at home. I'm writing these little letters. I don't know. I'm having a lot of fun with it.
Sounds cool, man.
I think I'm giving Michael a little anxiety because I just sort of randomly post.
It's
on
fine. It's your thing, baby.
Like
as long as one goes out a week, I'm happy. It's your thing now.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. Good. I'm glad we've reached this point.
We've had no complaints.
It's a lot of fun. So consider it. I'm doing everything I can to make it worth your while.
Love it. Okay, well, that wraps up another episode. Big thanks again to Andrew Juhl. Go check out all of his stuff. Until next time, good night.
And go get regressed. Bigfoot Collectors Club is produced by Riley Bray and Michael McMillan and scored and engineered by Riley Bray.
Our theme song, Come Alone, is by Suneaters, courtesy of Lotuspool Records. Do us a favor and support the show and unlock 3 bonus episodes every month by becoming a member of our Patreon, BCC The Other Side, which can be found at patreon.com/BigfootCollectorsClub.